Nathan, your mother just emailed me the recipe for tonight's dinner, right down to the brand of olive oil. My voice cracked with exhaustion as I stared at the email on my phone. Nathan looked up from his laptop, shrugging. Why are you making a big deal out of it, Claire? She's just trying to help. Help, I echoed, trying to keep my frustration in check. Since when does picking out every single ingredient down to the olive oil brand count as helping? Mom's got it figured out. She says this brand is the best, Nathan replied casually as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I bit my lip to keep from snapping. Nathan, it's not just the olive oil, it's everything. She planned our weekend, critiqued our vacation ideas, and even had opinions on which school Emma should attend. We're adults, for God's sake. Why can't we make our own decisions? Nathan leaned back in his chair, spreading his hands wide. Claire, she's been around longer. She knows what works. What's the harm in taking her advice? I sighed deeply, rubbing my temples. The harm is that it's not advice anymore. It's control. And you don't even see it. Nathan frowned. You're overthinking this. She just wants the best for us. Is it what she wants or what we want? I fired back. Nathan, your mother can't run our lives. My frustration boiled over. We need to set boundaries. He shook his head, looking more annoyed than understanding. You're always making her out to be the villain. She cares about us. That's it. I felt the walls closing in, the room shrinking. How could he not see it? That caring comes with strings, and it's those strings that are choking this marriage. Nathan's eyes narrowed. So now you're blaming our problems on my mother? Yes, I shot back without hesitation. Among other things. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Nathan turned back to his laptop, effectively ending the conversation. But the tension hung in the air, thick and palpable. Dinner that night was a farce. I went through the motions, chopping vegetables and simmering the sauce exactly as per Marilyn's precise instructions. Nathan ate in silence, absorbed in his phone, seemingly oblivious to the strain that had settled like a storm cloud over our table. As I put Emma to bed, her small fingers clinging to mine, I marveled at the innocence in her wide eyes. "Mommy, why do you look sad?" she asked softly. I forced a smile. "Mommy just had a long day, sweetie. I'm fine, really." Emma nodded, satisfied with my answer, and closed her eyes, slipping into dreams unmarred by the conflicts raging in the adult world. I envied her for that simplicity. Later, as I slipped into bed beside Nathan, who was already snoring softly, I stared at the ceiling, the anger and frustration gnawing at me. This wasn't the life I had imagined for us, for Emma. Something had to change. Nathan had to see the chains that bound him, the ones that were slowly starting to strangle me too. I turned away from him, pulling the covers tight around me. Tomorrow, I would start figuring out how to break free, how to reclaim my life, my sanity, my marriage, if it was even salvageable. In the darkness, my resolve hardened, crystal clear and unyielding. The unseen noose had tightened long enough. It was time to cut the strings. I sat on the edge of the couch, flipping through old photo albums. Nathan settled down next to me, looking slightly annoyed. "Why are we doing this, Claire?" Nathan asked, brow furrowed. "Do you remember this trip?" I asked, pointing to a picture of us on a beach, back when things were simpler. "Yeah, it was great," he replied, barely glancing at the photo. "Until your mother called about the stock market and you spent the rest of the vacation glued to your phone," I added, trying to keep my tone light. Nathan shrugged. "I wanted to make sure our investments were safe. Mom's advice was helpful." "Helpful?" I echoed. "She ruined our trip. That was the first time she really started interfering." Nathan rolled his eyes, clearly not interested in dredging up old grievances. "What's your point, Claire?" "My point is," I said, flipping to another photo, "it wasn't just a one-time thing. This has become our life, her life dictating ours." Before Nathan could respond, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Marilyn standing there, a smug smile on her face. "Hello, Claire. Came to check on my darlings," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Marilyn," I acknowledged tersely. "Wasn't expecting you." "Thought I'd surprise you." "Nathan, I picked up those organic carrots you like," she said, placing a bag on the kitchen counter. "Thanks, Mom," Nathan said, beaming at her. I watched as Marilyn moved around my kitchen like she owned the place. "You two need to eat healthier. Claire, you ought to clean your pantry. It's in such disarray," she remarked. I clenched my jaw. "I'll get to it." "Well, you should do it soon," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. The next few hours were a blur of Marilyn's relentless comments about my cooking, our decor, even the way I folded the towels. Nathan stood by, nodding approvingly at every word. "Marilyn," I said, watching her rearrange my spice rack. "We have our own routines here. Maybe we can talk about boundaries?" Marilyn turned, her eyes narrowing. "Boundaries? I'm just helping, Claire. Isn't that what family does?" Nathan looked between us, sensing the tension. "Mom, why don't we let Claire handle things her way?" Marilyn's gaze turned icy. "Nathan, why would you want to live in chaos when I can help bring order?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "I just think we should respect Claire's wishes." For a moment I thought I saw a glimmer of understanding in Nathan's eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by the familiar deference to his mother's will. Later that evening, after Marilyn left, I confronted Nathan. "Do you see the problem now?" Nathan sighed. "She means well, Claire. You're blowing this out of proportion. Am I?" I countered. "She canceled our vacation last year because it wasn't convenient for her. She's making decisions about our lives without consulting us." Nathan crossed his arms defensively. "She's just trying to look out for us." I shook my head, frustration bubbling over. "This isn't looking out for us, Nathan. It's controlling us." He rubbed his forehead, clearly tired. "Can we drop this, please?" "Not until you see what's happening," I insisted. "I can't stand living like this anymore." Nathan didn't respond. His silence spoke volumes, amplifying the growing chasm between us. As I went to bed that night, a new determination took hold. I needed to figure out a way to break free from Marilyn's grasp, and maybe from Nathan's blindness. Something had to change before it destroyed us all. I decided to start small. Maybe if I could make little changes, Nathan would notice. So, the next morning, I went shopping. Instead of the brand of olive oil Marilyn insisted on, I picked up a different one. I swapped out the brand of coffee she always recommended for something I actually liked. When I got home, Nathan was in the kitchen looking through the pantry. "Where's the coffee?" he asked. "Right here," I said, placing the new bag on the counter. "That's not the usual one," he said, inspecting it. "I know. I wanted to try something different," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant. Nathan frowned. "Mom says the other one is better." "Well, let's see if we like this one too," I suggested. He didn't look convinced, but shrugged. "Okay, fine." The week went on, and I continued making small changes. I rearranged the living room, moved the spices back to how I liked them, and bought myself a different brand of moisturizer. They were little rebellions, but they were mine. One evening, as we sat for dinner, Nathan said, "Mom's thinking of moving closer. Wouldn't that be great?" I nearly dropped my fork. "Moving closer? No, Nathan, it wouldn't be great." "Why not? She could help out more, be around Emma," he argued. "I don't need more of her help," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need boundaries, Nathan." He sighed. "You're overreacting again. Her being closer wouldn't be a bad thing." I looked at him, feeling completely defeated. "Nathan, if your mother moves closer, I don't think I can stay." "You don't mean that," he said, a hint of panic in his voice. "I do," I replied firmly. "We're barely holding together as it is." Before Nathan could respond, Emma ran into the room. "Look, Mommy," she said, holding up a drawing. "That's beautiful, Emma," I said, smiling at her. I glanced at Nathan, but his expression remained unchanged. He was already backing down, slipping into his usual pattern of agreeing with whatever his mother wanted. The next day, I met with Jessica, my lawyer, discreetly. I needed to be ready if things took a drastic turn. She was practical and direct, listening carefully as I explained the situation. "You need to protect yourself and your daughter," she said. "Have you considered divorce?" "I have," I admitted, "but I need to be sure. I'll start by preparing the papers, just in case." "Smart move," Jessica said, handing me some documents. "It's best to be prepared." Back at home, the tension thickened. Nathan could sense my growing resolve, but continued to deflect any serious discussion. One night, as I was tucking Emma into bed, Nathan received a call from Marilyn. "Mom thinks it's a good idea for us to take a break. Maybe even divorce if you're this unhappy," he said, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and resignation. I felt a surge of anger and resolution. "Is that what you want, Nathan?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer, just stared at the floor. "Then let's do it," I said, my voice steady. "If your mother thinks we should divorce, that's exactly what we'll do." That night, as I lay awake, Staring into the darkness, I knew there was no turning back. I was ready to break free, not just for me, but for Emma too. It was time to reclaim my life, even if it meant starting over. The small rebellions had paved the way for something bigger. It was time to cut the strings for good. Nathan stared at me from across the kitchen table, his eyes clouded with confusion. "Claire, can't we just take a break and see how things go?" I shook my head, feeling a firm resolve building inside me. "Nathan, your mother suggested divorce, so let's do it. Continuing to drag this out is only making things worse." He looked down, fiddling with the edge of the table. "But what about Emma? Can't we think about her?" I took a deep breath. "I am thinking about her. She deserves to grow up in a peaceful environment, not one filled with constant interference and tension." Nathan sighed. "All right, if it's what you really want," I nodded. "It is." The following week, Marilyn called. "Nathan, I heard about your little fight. What's going on?" Nathan's voice was strained. "Mom, Claire wants a divorce." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Marilyn's voice came through, sharp as a knife. "Good. Maybe it's for the best. If she can't appreciate what I do for you, she doesn't deserve to be part of this family." "Mom, don't you think that's a bit harsh?" Nathan asked, sounding uncertain. "Harsh? No, Nathan. I'm being realistic. Claire has always been ungrateful," Marilyn snapped. I watched Nathan struggle with his emotions, torn between his mother's harsh words and his sense of duty. Finally, he sighed. "All right, Mom. I guess you're right." The next day, I confronted Nathan with the divorce papers. "Sign these, Nathan. It's time to move on." He glanced at the papers, then back at me. "Are you sure this is what you want, Claire?" "Yes," I said firmly. "If your mother thinks we should divorce, then let's not waste any more time." He picked up the pen, his hand shaking slightly as he signed his name. I felt a mix of relief and sorrow, but I knew this was the right path for both Emma and me. Moving out was hard. Packing up our life, explaining things to Emma, all of it was emotionally draining. My parents welcomed us with open arms, providing a safe haven during such a turbulent time. During the divorce proceedings, Jessica was a rock. "Claire, we need to document everything. Marilyn's interference, her controlling behavior, it will help." I handed her emails, text messages, and even voice recordings. "Here, these should help." Nathan seemed torn during the meetings, occasionally glancing at me with regret. "Claire, I never wanted it to end like this." "Neither did I replied, "but this is the reality of your mother's control. We deserve better." As the proceedings continued, Nathan's reliance on Marilyn's advice became glaringly obvious. "Mom says I should contest this," he would say, "or Mom thinks we should." "Enough, Nathan," I finally interjected. "Stop letting her dictate your life. Make a decision for yourself." His shoulders slumped in resignation. "You're right. I'm sorry." Despite the emotional turmoil, I felt a growing sense of liberation. Marilyn's influence was being exposed, her control unraveling. It was time to rebuild, to create a life free from her toxic grip. On the day the divorce was finalized, Nathan approached me quietly. "Claire, I hope someday we can understand each other better." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As he walked away, I felt a strange mixture of hope and finality. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Back home, I hugged Emma tightly. "We're going to be okay, sweetie. Mommy's here, and we're going to make a wonderful new life together." Emma smiled up at me, her innocence and joy giving me the strength to face whatever came next. It was time to move forward, leaving Marilyn's shadow behind us. I packed the last of Emma's toys into a box, taping it shut with a finality that felt both liberating and terrifying. My parents hovered nearby, offering supportive smiles and helping hands. "Thanks for letting us stay, Mom, Dad," I said, attempting a smile. "Of course, honey. You and Emma are safe here," my mom, Martha, reassured me as she squeezed my shoulder gently. Emma was running around with Grandpa Greg, the sound of her playful laughter a stark contrast to the somber mood that settled over me. I looked around at the remnants of our past, now reduced to neatly packed boxes, ready to be moved into our new life. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, listening to the familiar creaks of the old house. Emma snuggled beside me, her soft breaths a comforting rhythm in the dark. I thought about Nathan and how we had finally, officially parted ways. The next morning, I met Jessica at her office to finalize some documents. She handed me a folder, her expression serious. "Claire, These papers lay it all out. Marilyn's intrusion, her manipulation. This will help us in court. Thank you, Jessica, I said quietly, my heart heavy with the weight of everything. Nathan's appearing conflicted, but he's following his mother's advice. It's clear who's pulling the strings, she continued, shaking her head. He always has, I replied sadly. But this is for the best, for Emma and me. Later we faced the judge. Nathan looked worn, his eyes shadowed with regret. Marilyn sat in the back, her presence looming over the room like a dark cloud. My lawyer presented the evidence clearly. Your Honor, these documents will show the extent of Marilyn's involvement and the harmful impact it has had on the Monroe family. Nathan was asked to explain his reliance on his mother. He stumbled through his words, each syllable a reluctant admission. My mother she always seemed to know what was best for us, he mumbled. But did she, Nathan? I countered. Or did she know what was best for her? He didn't answer, just looked down, ashamed. Jessica continued to drive the point home. Marilyn Monroe has manipulated and controlled not only Nathan and Claire's marriage, but also their finances and major life decisions. This is clear-cut interference. Marilyn's face twisted in anger, but she said nothing, her eyes shooting daggers at me. Nathan looked defeated as the judge listened. After what felt like an eternity, the verdict came. I won custody of Emma and significant support. Marilyn's interference was publicly acknowledged and documented. The relief was overwhelming. Finally, the truth was out in the open. After leaving the courthouse, Nathan approached me. Claire. Don't, I interrupted. We're past words now, Nathan. I hope you find your way, but I need to focus on Emma and me. He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. I'm so sorry, Claire. I hope you can forgive me someday. I offered him a small, sad smile. For Emma's sake, I hope so too. Back at my parents' house, I held Emma close. We did it, sweetheart. We're free. Martha and Greg rejoiced with me, their love and support an anchor through the storm we had endured. I felt the first real sense of hope that had eluded me for so long. Emma and I started to settle into our new life, free from Marilyn's toxic grip. That evening, as I tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes. Mommy, are we really okay now? Yes, my love, I replied, kissing her forehead. We're better than okay. We're free, and we have a wonderful future ahead of us. Emma smiled and cuddled into her pillow. I watched her for a moment, feeling a deep sense of peace. We had broken free from the strings of control, and now it was time to build a new life, one filled with love, freedom, and endless possibilities. Living with my parents had given Emma and me the respite we needed to start healing. One day, while organizing some boxes, I found an old email thread from Marilyn. As I read through the blatant manipulations, a plan formed in my mind. I had an ulterior motive for the divorce that had backfired for her, and now it was time to reveal the full extent of her machinations. I called Jessica immediately. Jessica, I found more evidence, emails that show just how deep Marilyn's control went. That's great, Claire, she replied. We can use this to solidify any ongoing legal concerns. Let's meet tomorrow. The next day, I handed the stack of printed emails to Jessica. She skimmed through them, her eyes widening. These are explicit. It's clear she never intended for the divorce to actually happen. It was all a control tactic gone wrong. We began documenting everything meticulously. Jessica advised, we need a final confrontation to present this to Nathan. He needs to see just how destructive his mother's influence has been. That evening, I called Nathan. We need to talk, I said firmly. I don't think there's much left to say, he replied, sounding hesitant. There is, I insisted. Meet me tomorrow at the park where we used to take Emma. The next day, I arrived early, clutching the evidence tightly. Nathan showed up looking wary but curious. What's this about, Claire? I handed him the stack of emails. Read these. He started going through the pages, his expression changing from confusion to disbelief, then to shame. I had no idea, he mumbled. This is what your mother has been doing, I said, my voice steady. She never wanted us to be happy. She needed to control us. Nathan's eyes filled with tears. How could I have missed this? All these years. You trusted her blindly, Nathan, I replied, feeling a mix of pity and satisfaction. But now you see the truth. Over the next few days, Nathan struggled to reconcile the revelations. He showed up at my parents' house seeking closure. Claire, I don't know how to make amends, but I need to try. We need to focus on Emma's well-being, I said. That's the most important thing. Nathan nodded, looking broken. I'll do whatever it takes. The court hearings resumed, but this time Nathan was different. He began to question everything he'd accepted as truth. How could I not see this? All these years she's been pulling the strings. In the courtroom, I presented the evidence with Jessica's help. The judge listened intently, the weight of the documentation impossible to ignore. Marilyn, who had always been so confident, looked uncharacteristically nervous. Nathan Monroe has been under undue influence from his mother for years, Jessica concluded. This is more than meddling. It's a calculated control over every aspect of their lives. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me full custody of Emma and significant support. Marilyn's manipulations were laid bare for all to see. Nathan, now financially and emotionally separated from his mother, stepped outside the courthouse looking like a man untethered. Claire, he said, approaching me hesitantly. I'm so sorry for everything. I hope you can find your own path, Nathan, I replied sincerely. I'm going to start therapy, he said, looking determined but lost. I need to understand all of this. For Emma's sake, I hope you do, I replied. Driving back home, a sense of freedom washed over me. I had not only survived but had broken free from Marilyn's toxic grip. Emma and I had a stable future ahead, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely hopeful. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, she looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes. Mommy, are we really okay now? Yes, sweetheart, I whispered, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. We're better than okay. We're finally free. And with that, I knew we had truly turned a corner. This was our new beginning. The courtroom was silent as Jessica and I walked in, the air thick with anticipation. Nathan was already seated, his eyes red and weary. Marilyn, sitting beside him, looked defiant, though there was a flicker of worry in her eyes. Jessica stood up, presenting our final pieces of evidence with calm determination. Your Honor, I will now present recorded conversations and further emails that explicitly demonstrate Marilyn Monroe's undue influence and manipulation. The judge motioned for us to proceed. Jessica played the recordings, Marilyn's voice echoing through the room, meticulously planning out our lives without any regard for our autonomy. The courtroom was transfixed, and I could see Nathan slowly crumbling with every word. This is what your mother has been doing to us, Nathan, manipulating every aspect of our lives, I said, turning to him. Nathan looked at Marilyn, a deep sadness in his eyes. Mom, how could you? I trusted you. Marilyn's face hardened. I did it for you, Nathan. Everything I did was to make sure you had the best. At what cost? Nathan. responded, his voice cracking. "You've controlled my life, my marriage, my family." The judge cleared his throat, bringing order back to the courtroom. "It is clear from the evidence that Marilyn Monroe has exerted excessive control over the family, resulting in significant emotional and psychological harm." He continued, "I rule in favor of Claire Monroe. She will have full custody of their daughter and receive the necessary support. Furthermore, Marilyn Monroe is to have no contact with Emma Monroe unless explicitly permitted by the court." Marilyn's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Nathan, looking devastated, nodded reluctantly. "I understand," he whispered. After the ruling, I walked out of the courthouse feeling a mix of liberation and sorrow. Nathan was standing nearby, looking lost. "I'm so sorry," he said, coming up to me. "I hope you can rebuild your life, Nathan," I said. "For Emma's sake, and for yours." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I'll try. I'm starting therapy. I need to find out who I am without her." As he walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sliver of hope for him. Maybe he could finally break free from Marilyn's grasp. When we arrived at my parents' house, they greeted us with open arms. "It's over?" my dad asked softly. I nodded, lifting Emma into my arms. "It's over. We can finally move on." The next few days were a whirlwind of settling into our new life. I started working part-time, focusing on building a stable future for Emma and myself. The community rallied around us, offering support and friendship. One afternoon, while picking Emma up from her new preschool, I saw Nathan in the crowd. He looked different, more fragile, but there was a determination in his eyes. Our eyes met briefly, and he gave a small, hopeful nod. Later that night, as I was preparing dinner, Emma ran into the kitchen, giggling. "Mommy, can we invite Daddy to visit sometimes?" I knelt down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We'll see, sweetheart. Daddy needs some time to sort things out." She nodded, satisfied with my answer, and went back to her coloring. For the first time in a long while, I felt a deep sense of peace. The strings of control had been cut, and we were free to chart our own course. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, I reflected on the journey we had taken. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. We had faced the darkness and come out stronger, ready to embrace the future without fear. And so, with Emma by my side and a new path ahead, I knew we were finally free. We had broken the chains and could now build a life filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. I watched from the sidelines as Emma ran across the playground, her laughter ringing through the crisp autumn air. Parents gathered in small clusters, chatting and occasionally cheering for their kids. Today was a special day, Emma's first school event since the divorce. As I scanned the crowd, my eyes landed on a familiar figure. Nathan stood under a tree, looking thinner, almost frail, but there was a newfound resolve in his posture. For a moment, our eyes met, and he offered a small wave. I waved back, feeling a pang of sorrow for what could have been. Emma spotted him and ran over. "Daddy, look at my drawing," she shouted, holding up a picture she'd colored. Nathan knelt down, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "That's beautiful, Emma. You're such a talented artist." Her face lit up with pride. "Mommy said the same thing." Nathan's eyes flickered to me again. He stood up, taking slow, deliberate steps towards me. "Claire, can we talk for a moment?" I nodded, not sure what to expect. We moved to a quieter corner of the playground. "Thank you for letting me come," Nathan began, taking a deep breath. I know I've caused a lot of pain, but I'm working on myself. Therapy's helping me see things more clearly. I listened, sensing the sincerity in his voice. That's good, Nathan. Really? He glanced back at Emma, who was now showing her drawing to another parent. I want to be a better father for her. I know it won't be easy, but I'm committed to it. You need to find your own way, Nathan, I said softly. Emma deserves the best from both of us. He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. Thank you, Claire, for everything. Just then, a hush fell over the crowd. People were whispering and glancing towards the entrance. Marilyn walked in, her once commanding presence reduced to a shadow of its former self. She scanned the playground, her eyes landing on us. Nathan stiffened beside me. Marilyn approached, her expression a mix of anger and desperation. Nathan, what are you doing here? You know you shouldn't. Nathan cut her off. Enough, Mom. This is Emma's day. I'm here as her father. Marilyn seemed taken aback, her lips trembling. But you need, she stammered. I need to be free from you, Mom. Nathan said firmly. Your control over my life is over. Her face contorted with rage. After everything I've done for you? Nathan took a deep breath. You did those things for yourself, not for me. I'm done living under your shadow. Marilyn turned to me, her eyes burning with hatred. This is your doing, Claire. I met her gaze steadily. No, Marilyn, this is Nathan's choice. She stormed off, the weight of her defeat evident in every step. Nathan watched her go, a mix of relief and sorrow etched on his face. Thank you, he said again, his voice trembling, for giving me the strength to stand up to her. I nodded, feeling the finality of the moment. Later, as the event wrapped up and parents started to leave, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Emma and I had created a life free from Marilyn's toxic influence, and now even Nathan was beginning to find his way. That evening, as we settled back at home, Emma ran up to me with a wide grin. Mommy, today was the best day. It sure was, sweetie, I said, pulling her into a hug. After tucking her into bed, I sat by the window, looking out at the stars. We had come so far, and despite all the challenges, we were finally free. The strings of control had been cut, and a new chapter awaited us, one filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities.